The United States Supreme Court was established in 1789 and is recognized today as the highest federal court in the United States judicial system. For over 200 years, the United States Supreme Court has tried cases regarding the interpretation of the Constitution and disputes on the matters of state rights. Due to the influence that the court has on the interpretation of the law, the appointment of a new justice has always been a controversial issue, especially if they share the same interpretation as the president. Since the retirement of Associative Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy in June of 2018, the Supreme Court had been left with only 8 members. Nearly 2 weeks following Kennedy's retirement, President Donald Trump nominated former 13th Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Brett Michael Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court. Kavanaugh's conservative stance on abortion and the Second Amendment made him a suitable nominee for President Trump.
I am deeply honored to be nominated to fill his seat on the Supreme Court.
Brett Kavanaugh attended Georgetown Prep, an all-boys high school located in Washington, D.C., and graduated from Yale University in 1987. He then continued his education at the Yale School of Law, where he received his Juris Doctorate in 1990. Later, he worked as a judge on the D.C. Court of Appeals for 12 years prior to his appointment to the Supreme Court by President Trump on October 6, 2018. Weeks before his appointment, things took an unexpected turn.
Brett's assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details.
Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a professor at Palo Alto University and a research psychologist at the Stanford School of Medicine, brought up allegations of sexual misconduct on the part of Kavanaugh, which caused a subsequent Senate hearing about whether or not his nomination would go to the floor. The hearing and Kavanaugh's eventual confirmation would spark a massive controversy, as many across the nation felt that Dr. Ford had given a legitimate and convincing testimony and that a guilty man was going to assume a seat on the highest court. July 6th, 3 days before Kavanaugh's appointment, Dr. Ford wrote to her congresswoman, voicing her concerns about the possibility of Kavanaugh being appointed. After Kavanaugh's appointment, Dr. Ford, a graduate of Holton Arms School, less than 10 miles from Georgetown Prep, wrote a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein describing how she had been sexually assaulted by Kavanaugh at a party in 1982. The letter was leaked, and Ford went public with the Washington Post. While Kavanaugh denied all claims, Ford's lawyer emailed the Senate Judiciary Committee saying that Ford had agreed to testify. Meanwhile, 2 other women, Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick, came forward and said that they also had had experiences of sexual assault involving Brett Kavanaugh during their time at Yale. On September 27th, both Ford and Kavanaugh testified before the Senate Judiciary hearing. On the 28th, the committee voted to send Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Senate floor. The hearing is central to the controversy. Republicans feel that the hearing was simply a political maneuver to prevent a justice so strongly associated with the policies of Donald Trump to be confirmed to the Supreme Court.
This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics.
They maintain that the testimonies given at the hearings were enough to acquit Kavanaugh, despite the fact that he refused to be investigated by the FBI and that many called his temperament during the hearings unbecoming of a justice.
Throughout my 53 years and 7 months on this earth until last week, no one ever accused me of any kind of sexual misconduct. No one, ever.
Democrats, and those who feel that Kavanaugh did, in fact, assault Ford, believe that Ford's testimony was enough to merit a further investigation. However, there were inconsistencies in Dr. Ford's accounts. She couldn't remember specific details from the experience, nor could she recall whose house she was in, when the event took place, the specific month, day, or even year that the event occurred on. She also claimed to have never told anyone, not even her mother or other family, about what happened, so there are no other individuals that could have verified the story aside from herself. Her lifelong friend, Leland Ingham Kaiser, one of the 4 people Ford claimed was with her that night, doesn't recall having been at a party with Brett Kavanaugh. Dr. Ford also responded to those skeptical of her story and her ability to fully remember by stating in the San Jose Mercury, a newspaper in the news this July, that she's been trying to forget this all of her life and now she's supposed to remember every little detail. The fact that the details of the story were foreign to Ford has gained the attention of many psychologists that focus on post-traumatic stress associated with sexual assault victims, first responders, and veterans. Incomplete memories are normal due to the fact that central details are typically remembered best, as they have emotional significance and alter the life of the person at hand. Peripheral memories, memories of things that you are not focused on, are forgotten, are hard to remember, especially over a long period of time. All of this makes sense for someone who may have been sexually assaulted, as they may not be able to remember many outside details related to their traumatic experience. As Dr. Hopper, a consultant at Harvard Medical School, explains,
the more the person was terrified in the midst of an assault, the more likely their memories are to be fragmented. The more likely they are to be missing certain contextual information or time sequence, which is another context, right? The context of time. So you tend to get these fragmentary sensations and emotions that, especially initially, the person may not be able to put them together. Maybe like puzzle pieces strewn on the floor and you don't have the picture and you don't have the edge pieces and how does this stuff all fit together? And so when you're the investigator talking to someone who's been through this, the memories they retrieve, they can be incomplete, they can be inconsistent, especially for peripheral details, the stuff they weren't really paying attention to, and they can be very disorganized.
But to the skeptics, that still doesn't explain why she came out 40 years later. Advocates for Ford attribute this to the Me Too movement, a Twitter-based campaign used by women to account their experiences with sexual harassment. The campaign began as a reaction to allegations by more than 100 actresses and others that Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein harassed, raped, or coerced into sex. But it has morphed into a movement that has led women from all walks of life to speak up about sexual harassment and abuse. This movement has led to an explosion of allegations from women about workplace sexual harassment, leading to the resignations of many of the accused. There have been numerous allegations against President Trump, among other men. As sexual assault shifts into the public eye, wariness towards the intentions of men has correspondingly increased. As Dr. Ford herself said, for years she was too afraid and ashamed to tell her story. The increased acceptance of women coming forward with their story that has come with the Me Too movement could explain why she was finally able to do so. As to why women have trouble sharing their stories, Amira Rose Davis, a women's gender studies professor at Penn State University, had this to say.
One of my colleagues who studies rape and college football indicated that she received a note from somebody disclosing a rape 34 years ago and only did so because they saw a list of rape charges over the last few years that my colleague had curated and realized that her story she wasn't alone. And that gave her strength to speak out, able to say, I can speak out. I feel comfortable in speaking out now because before I was taught that I wouldn't be believed or that my character would go on trial.
To better gauge where the public stands on this controversy, we decided to interview college students here at Penn State.
Setting a precedent in our country that I thought we were past with like the whole Me Too movement that's gone on lately. Our government just saying a huge like who cares about someone's sexual assault and someone that we're going to put on the Supreme Court is really upsetting in 2018.
I do. I think she's full of it. I think the other women who came forward and accused him were just jumping on the bandwagon.
I think guilt should be proven before guilt is presumed.
It's kind of making a stance with an appointment to the Supreme Court. It's making a stance that we, the Republicans or Trump's people in office, do not support the Me Too movement or the women's rights movement as it is today.
I watched a lot of the trials and she wasn't a very believable person.
Despite all information that we have on memory as it relates to traumatic experiences, there is still no evidence that Brett Kavanaugh did, without doubt, assault Dr. Ford. Regardless, it is still a possibility that the assault did occur, and if a sexual deviant does sit on the Supreme Court, it would certainly be a failure of justice. Because of this, his confirmation remains a divisive topic.